Hello and welcome back to the Surfer's Library, proudly presented by Hillsborough Surf Club. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legends. Today's story is called 66. It's one of the many stories in Drew Kampion's book, The Lost Coast, Stories from the Surf. August 1966. A hot night in the San Fernando Valley near Los Angeles. I was staying with a friend and his wife in an apartment in Reseda, and I was suffocating. Despite the perennial drought, the air outside was damp. Vapors hung over the city, rising from pools and sprinklers, mating with all the other sweet and acrid particulates, creating a uniquely LA atmospheric brew. But the screen on the window might as well have been a wall. No air passed in or out. It was dead still. On an impulse, I snapped up out of bed, straightened the blankets, threw the wet pillow on a chair, and folded the hide-a-bed back into the sofa. I replaced the cushions, grabbed the pillow and the rest of my things, wrote a short note, "Gone surfing, back late," and slipped out, locking the door behind me. Down the concrete steps around the oily slick pool with its sheen of reflected lights, through the iron gate with a clack and a click, and out to the street where my tan 1960 VW Westphalia van was parked beneath the light at the end of the cul-de-sac between two more ordinary cars. The long apocalyptic surf poem grease-penned on the side of my van definitely set it apart. Outside, the night was warm but with a clammy chill so common in Southern California. The vinyl seat was cold on the underside of my legs where my shorts didn't cover them. I found the ignition slot on the column. The engine jogged a few steps, then fluttered off into an idle. I jockeyed back and forth a few times to get purchase, then swung out from the curb and down the street. I was headed southwest across the valley towards the Ventura Freeway, cool wind laced with warm puffs coming in through the pulled-back half windows. The dash lights dim and faintly yellow, the way they are in old 6-volt electrical systems. The headlights on the road ahead scarcely brighter. In 2 or 3 miles, I came to the freeway, took the first on-ramp, and labored up the grade. And like any decent owner of a 36-horsepower V-dub, I always labored when my van labored. West I rolled, the freeway almost empty at just after 3 a.m. Winding out through the west end of the valley past Calabasas, I took the Las Virgenes Canyon turnoff, the road now completely deserted, chugged south towards the coast. A dim half-moon was sinking in sick greens behind the smooth black silhouettes of the mountains to the west. And the night was so dark now that the beams from my headlights seemed satisfyingly bright as I danced through the familiar easy curves, straightaways, and tight S-turns, driving through occasional bubbles of very cool air deep in the tangy canyon vaults, until I took a last sharp right-hand curve and saw the lights along the Pacific Coast Highway far below. I turned left at the highway. No one was coming, and I puttered slowly south a half mile or so, pulling alongside a row of parked cars at Surfrider Beach, just north of the Malibu Pier. I was surprised to see so many cars, but I found a spot and backed in tight to the curb, turned off the ignition, and listened to the surge and sigh of the ocean replace the staggering shutdown of the little 4-cylinder engine. The air here was still, too, but it was heavy with sage and salt that pressed into the van and filled me with lush and powerful sensations. After a minute, I got out, took a leak into the bushes over near the famous graffitied Malibu wall, then went back to the van and opened out the side doors. I shoved my surfboard over and propped the nose up on the driver's side seat, then slipped in under it, onto the bed, to get some sleep before dawn, leaving the doors open to collect the sound and smell of the coast. But I couldn't sleep, or even really rest. That sound and the smell, and knowing I had no alarm to wake me up. I climbed out again about 4:30, took off my shirt and locked up the front of the car. Then I went around to the back and opened it up and drew out my 9-foot 6-inch Con surfboard and a quarter bar of Parawax. Then I slammed and locked the rear hatch, hid the keys off a corner of dusty metal up underneath the driver's side front wheel well, and picked my way carefully barefoot along the soft roadside dust and glass to the sandy notch that led down the small slope and around the end of the wall and out onto the beach. There was enough light from the Malibu Inn and the pier that I could see a little of the beach. Sure enough, there were some couples here and there, lying on blankets or just on the sand. I could hear a steady roll of surf and dim curtains of whitewater drawing shoreward out of the dark, invisible ocean. I walked 100 yards or so up the beach, away from the lights, then laid my board on the sand, waxed it, slipped the wax into my inside pocket of my trunks, and walked down to the water. The air was cooler down here, and the first touch of wet sand under my feet was cold, and I was covered with goosebumps and shivers. But then a foamy sheet of water washed over my feet and around my ankles, and it was Southern California's summertime warm. I guided the board carefully in the dark as my feet pawed tentatively over the barnacled cobble and occasional larger chunks of slippery rock. When the water was at my crotch, I threw the board up onto a whitewater surge and slid stomach first onto the waxed deck and paddled hard out into the darkness. I bashed through a couple of whitewater surges, then punched through the face of a dim black wall that was on the verge of breaking, and then I was out the back and clear of the sets. It was a momentous day. I was going to ride the first wave of Malibu on a south swell August morning. Something not so easy to do anymore in 1966, when there were often 100 or more surfers packing the lineups on a warm, classy day. Sometimes, a perfect small summer wave wrapping onto Malibu would become so crowded with surfers as it broke, it seemed to slow and sag under the burden. And out in the lineup, it was a cross-section of the sports hierarchy, especially this summer with the World Contest coming up in October in San Diego. Today was going to be very crowded, but at least I'd have a few rare waves to myself soon. I could almost see the swells sweeping towards me now out of the blue-black southwest. It was hard to tell, but they seemed 3 or 4 feet high, a perfect size for fun and stampy little waves that go curling into the small bay at Surfrider. From the water, looking back towards the pier, the reflected lights revealed the pulses of swell as they rushed towards the beach. I could see the line of the wave as it passed steeply underneath me, lifting me high, stretching and wrapping south towards the pier. And I studied the viscosity of the water surface as it was stretched and ripped by the curling muscles of the wave further towards the shore. How soon, I wondered, would it be light enough to see? To see that wave coming and turn and ride it, the first ride of the day at Malibu. Despite the sweet and bitter aroma and cool breeze that drifted out across the water to me every couple of minutes, I was drifting into a reverie when I found myself listening to voices. 2 guys talking quietly, unintelligibly, just above a whisper. With a start and a sudden feeling of panic, I realized there were 2 other surfers out there in the water with me. Maybe 3. Drawn by the voices, I could see their forms now, pale and dark against the black, dimly revealed by the lights on the pier. I was suddenly embarrassed. Awkward. I sucked in my gut, made purposeful paddling gestures as I sat upright on my board. Ashore, the high, crisp line of the Santa Monica Mountains was clearly defined now, in bright, deep blue. Out towards the point, I could now discern a string of surfers. 10, 20. I couldn't tell, except that I was not alone. In fact, I appeared to be the surfer furthest south around the point towards the pier. In a world of territory and positioning, and surfing is such a world, if I stayed where I was low man on the totem pole. I'd have to defer to anyone riding a wave this way from the point, since the wave broke from far out that way and peeled towards the spot where I was sitting. First guy to drop in on a wave has possession. Anyone else is dropping in, barging, cutting off, leeching, and looking for trouble. But out there at the tip of the point, it was going to be the usual pack, and that was no fun either, unless you were one of the core boys. Luckily, I was used to this scenario. Avoiding the pack out at the point, I generally played the game of trying to pull other inside guys in too far towards the beach or out too far into the cove. I knew that on most waves, there was a large section that curled over just up the point from where I was sitting, and on some waves it was too fast for any but the best surfers to cross to the inside where I waited. I would line up the wave, paddle for it, and wait on the far side of this section to see if the surfer with possession was going to make it. When it became clear he wasn't, or if he fell, I paddled into the wave and often had the last, sometimes excellently shaped, section of wall to myself, right down into the cove, sometimes right to the pier. So I decided to wait where I was, since now the softening dawn was showing me a dark, burnished purple Pacific with a pinkening dark sky and a flotilla of dark silhouettes. Other guys like me who paddled out in the dead of night to wait here for the first wave. And then, suddenly, someone else has it. Somebody with better night vision than I. He goes slipping by, shooting past like a swift bird between me and the beach, although I hear nothing but the snap and surging roar of wave that has just passed beneath me until a few seconds later, a small, private whoop pierces the cascade of the inside shore break. Other surfers follow as the morning comes on, dark shapes, crouching or flailing or posing, even in this dim light. Yet it's another 15 minutes before my own eyes get enough depth perception to anticipate and line up with the approaching swells, and then I have to watch that big section to the left, hoping someone will fail to make it through so I can drop in and ride one. But they keep making it through, one after another after another, the sections holding up just long enough for them to skate under the lip and ahead of the curl and into the area of the wave where I am waiting. I paddle for wave after wave, pushing forward into the rushing whoosh of spray in the suspended lip, only to pull back as the committed rider streaks by. The sharp ridge of mountains is brilliant yellow gold now, fading through green up to powder blue and then into a darker, deeper blue. The western horizon is pink and silver with cloud and reflected dawn. The sun is just about ready to rise and stab my eyes when I spot a band of dark water approaching from out beyond the point, followed by another and another. It's a good set, the biggest by far this morning. I wheel my board around, lay down on my belly, and paddle like hell straight out towards the building walls. Despite the jitterbugs twisting in my stomach, I grow exultant with each deep stroke of hands and arms into the water. The first wall of water is the most incredible impression. I surge across a surface of glistening deep purple ripples, smooth as a lake and textured by the morning wind out of the Malibu Canyon. Lying prone and paddling, I can't be sure how big it is until I see someone drop in out at the point. It's about 3 feet over his head and torquing into a clamshell concave when he jams a bottom turn and starts flying down the line in my direction. The wave is walled straight across from the point to the pier and zippering off perfectly, with one of Malibu's best surfers poised perfectly in the cup of the curl. I can't remember who, maybe it was Cowboy Henderson, and I'm paddling so hard going up the face, watching the perfect symmetry of surfer and curl as I work, that I go airborne for a few feet off the top and splash down hard beyond. The next wave is darker and bigger and already fringing, and Lance Carson is carving and banking and trimming so perfectly that he laces the wave together in one long, perfect ride. No chance for me to turn and take it anyway. It's too hollow already when I claw up the face and over. The third wave is a little bigger still and just as perfect. Now I'm in the right spot to turn and paddle into it. But 3 guys are already on it, chasing down the point towards me, carving arcs around the litter of boards and swimmers caught inside by the big set. Knowing 3 waves to a set is about all you can expect at Malibu. I paddle up and over the wave, feeling like I've missed another opportunity as the 3 dance past me. But there is a 4th, as big and perfect as the 3rd, and there's nobody left to ride it. I paddle out to meet it, breathing hard and concentrating, because now I fear more than anything the possibility of wasting something so absolutely pristine, this gift of the perfect wave and the perfect moment. I spin toward shore just ahead of the advancing wall, dig deep in a crawling series of paddles, and pull myself down the face of the wave. I jump to my feet, trim straight down to the hollowing bottom of the wall, then lean into a big carving turn towards the shoulder, seeing the long, sweet wall extend ahead of me all the way to the pier just as the beam of the sun clears the ridge and sends a hot flash into my eyes. Blinking away the spots, gathering speed, my board chattering across an impeccable wall of dark water gilded with sunlight, the warm, sage-scented wind rushing at my face. I can't begin to imagine a finer moment. I've caught the first wave of the day at Malibu. It's 1966, and I'm stoked. Totally stoked. You would be too. The author of today's story was Drew Kampion. Drew Kampion is a pioneering surf writer and editor who transformed Surfer magazine in the late 1960s into a countercultural force, blending sports journalism with humor, philosophy, and social commentary. Beyond surfer, he wrote for Surfing Magazine, penned influential books like Stoked, A History of Surf Culture, and contributed to various surf publications and media projects. His witty, eclectic style made him one of the most versatile voices in surf literature, earning him a place as the first writer inducted into the Huntington Beach Surfers Walk of Fame in 2008. Well, thank you for listening along. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Until next time, keep your stoke high and your bottom turns tight, and I'll see you in the lineup.